So I was working on the microphones. I hope you guys can hear us okay. Go ahead and say something real quick.
Jeff,
we're gonna start the show by checking.
The pregame is Jeff complaining.
Hoping it's working.
That's pregame.
Comment if it's not working. Welcome to the Midday Show. I'm Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina.
I'm not complaining. Jeff is.
We're gonna talk about bar behavior. There were a couple of incidences locally. So we're going to talk about some basic bar behavior, things we've noticed, things we've seen. We're going to talk about the unsettling feeling that it feels like people are settling into the invasion. It feels like this is the war and it's here and it's not going anywhere. We're going to talk about a couple of things we've seen with that. Handshake lines are simple, or at least I thought they were. There was another incident in the ACC that we're going to talk about. And then at the end, I have some pretty astonishing statistics.
These are cool. I'm ready for that part.
Comparing boys and girls. The stats are from the previous year or two. And it just kind of says for every 100 girls, here's how many boys do the same thing. It's very interesting.
That part, I'm ready to get to that part.
I'm interested to talk about, is it because they're boys, or is it because of opportunity, or is it because of expectation? I'm just curious. I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation. So we're going to get to that too. Before we get to all of this, the most important question of the day on the Midday Show, Mark, how are you feeling today?
Well, it's good until we started, and then you started complaining right before we got on, and then
that wasn't a complaint. I really wanted to make sure the mics work. I get upset when it doesn't work. Plus, it's the
I get it.
You have over my head, because if they don't work, it's not your fault.
No, none of this. No, I understand the technical pressure that you're under, because if something doesn't work, I can't help you.
No.
All I can say is I don't think this is working.
I'm just on an island.
I had the whole. We had a transformer blew.
Okay.
And like on the pole, because you could hear it. It was just like pop up yesterday at our house, and our TV went out.
Okay.
So because the power went out.
Yeah.
So the thing had to reset.
Okay.
And I'm doing all this unplug, plug, and whatever. Yeah. And it was just the power, and it had to recycle. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, it's back on. But for like 3 minutes, I felt so helpless, because I was like, it won't work. I can't fix it.
Right.
But little did I know it was like power outage. But it just, because it popped, like everything just went off and on, and then we were good.
I was watching, not to hijack here, how are you feeling today? The other night I was watching a new Netflix movie called Against the Ice. Have you heard about this at all?
Mm.
The main character is one of the guys from Game of Thrones. So it's not like critically acclaimed.
So the main character is a dragon?
No, it is not.
Oh.
But essentially what it is, it's people exploring Greenland. But to go back to the whole idea of like electric and everything else, I have never felt more useless than watching this movie, because it's based like early 1900s. And so these two guys know how to do everything. Like one's a mechanic, and then the other one's like a, adventure explorer. So he knows all these different, they know this route does this. And I'm watching these two, and I'm thinking to myself, like, if I didn't have a phone and I was trying to do this, I knew nothing.
It's fascinating that you would say you've never felt so useless.
Yeah.
Because you and I, there are lots of aspects of life where we are useless.
Oh, yeah.
So for you to never have felt this useless, that is saying something.
I mean, they're going across, they have sled dogs, and they're going across, and they're trying to figure out if Greenland connects or not. No one had ever gone the whole way across Greenland. And they're trying to go, and I'm watching this, and they're solving all these problems, and they're figuring all this stuff out. And I'm just like they knew this stuff. You know what I mean? Like they had to memorize, and they had to know it. And I'm just watching it, and I'm like, I just would have been, if I was the third person on this journey, they would have just shot and ate me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have brought any value to the table.
The only value you brought was nutrition.
Yeah, that's about it.
I think I've said this before, and this is what I've heard, and I don't know if it's true, because Greenland is a wasteland. Mm-hmm. There's like not a whole lot to it.
Well, according to the movie, there's nothing there.
But when you hear Greenland, you think of lush, and and I've heard that they named Iceland because it was nice, and they didn't want people to think it was nice, because they didn't want people to invade it or whatever whenever it got named. Yeah. So that they're like, if we call it Iceland, who wants to come to Iceland?
Right.
So that's what I heard. So I don't know if there's any truth to that, because it's Iceland is nice and Greenland is not.
Yeah.
And they should be flipped.
No, they say that in the Mighty Ducks movie too.
What?
There's an episode where he goes out with the Iceland assistant coach.
Okay.
This blonde lady.
Okay.
And he's talking about Iceland, and she goes, Iceland is very nice, and Greenland is not. So like
in the first one, or the?
I think it's the second one. It's when they go to the Pan Am Games.
Okay. I don't think I saw it. The second one.
So according to
Maybe I
Mighty
did.
Ducks, you are correct.
And I didn't even see that.
Some bar behavior from the weekend. There's a couple of stories here.
None of this involves you directly.
None of this involves me directly. I'm willing to say I'm probably more of a bar fly than you are right now. Is that a fair
Yes.
assessment?
Yes.
Okay. Not that you don't get out.
I was there Saturday night for the UFC fights.
See, there you go. So you still make an appearance here or there. There were some happenstances, some incidences. So we're just going to talk about not necessarily like the exact incident, but there are some stuff. So for example, one of the stories you can find at NorthcentralPa.com is about a man who apparently left after flipping some tables. And I said to you, have you ever attempted to flip a table?
No. You know what I've always wanted to try to do with a table, and this doesn't go with bar fights. I've always wanted to try to rip the tablecloth out from under the plates and stuff. But no, I've never tried to flip one. Not a big one.
You have to try.
It would not be easy.
Let's put it this way. You're not doing it by accident.
No, you didn't bump into a table and it capsized.
And it flips. Like if you're flipping a table, someone or something has worked you up to a point where like you cannot take it any longer. No?
Yeah. Oh no, I'm with you. And in this one, he flipped multiple tables on his way out.
It is tables plural.
Plural. Not just one.
I wasn't there. I wasn't the officer. So this is, again, you can find the story on NorthcentralPa.com. He stormed out after flipping several tables.
Does it say why?
He failed the sobriety test, so I'm sure that's the first.
Oh, they cut him off.
I'm sure, maybe. I mean, that's possible. The first step to all of this, like if you fail the sobriety test, that's the first step. So clearly you were feeling a way about something.
But he was still sober enough and coordinated enough to flip the table.
Well, see, this brings up another good question. How coordinated do you have to be to flip a table? Because when you're flipping a table,
That's true.
You're putting.
It's just effort and energy and lifting. You might be right.
Not just energy, like all your energy and effort. I feel like you really have to dedicate yourself to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I guess it would be interesting to see. I would want to see the table.
Okay.
Because there are some bar tables that you flip it, you did a heck of a job. And then there are some that I can imagine, like a little four top that's uneven, that you already have sugar packets wedged under it because it already isn't balanced.
I know.
There are some bar tables, little four tops that I could flip with no effort.
To me, a flip, like you flipped it. Like it is not like you didn't nudge it, you didn't push it over. Like you flipped the table. Yeah,
that would be a thing for dramatic effect. Is it if you just one hand and whip it and it falls on its side? Does that count as flipping a table, or does that count as knocking it over?
So to me, flipping like the legs are up.
That's what I would think.
Okay, that's how I take flipping a table. If you flip a table, you got that bad boy to go over.
I would think, but we would have to see. Maybe we're wrong.
Bad boy or bad girl. A table can be.
A table could be either one.
Could be both. The other one, and there's also a report about a local bar mistreating members of it's basically employees, mistreating its employees. I'm curious, like when I've always been in a bar, and maybe I'm fortunate, most of the bars that I've been at, the employees seem as if they get along. Like there's a camaraderie at most bars that I'm sure you don't see necessarily. I'm sure like when you go behind,
like that we don't have here. Is that what you're saying?
I'm sure when you go behind the bar, and that joke only works today. I don't know.
Wait a minute.
That is funny.
I think my jokes work every day.
But I think there's this idea like everything, anytime you go to a good bar or restaurant, the outside looks great, right? And what I mean by the outside, I mean is where the clientele is sitting. Mm-hmm. But if you've ever worked and want to run
in the back of the house,
in the back of the house, like the moment you go through the
that's where stuff gets real.
It is. I don't know. Most places that work are chaotic in the back half of it.
Oh yeah, at a bar or restaurant, unless it's dead. But if it's busy, it is chaotic.
Okay, I agree with that. But it's amazing that it doesn't flood over. Like I feel like we could write.
It's like it's like backstage and on stage.
I agree with that. But it's amazing that these stories don't come out more often.
Oh, I don't want to say, do you think it? Well, so it depends. When you said mistreated, what did they
so
mean?
We have different stories up on the site. There is a story up right now that involves. I want to make sure that I use the correct language here. I don't want to mess this up. So let me pull up the other one because people are going to get the two stories confused. They're going to think we're talking about one and not the other because there were several from the weekend. There is one about accusations. Been charged with indecent assault is one of them. So one of them is verbal indecent assault.
Wait. Verbal indecent assault.
Yeah, you can verbally assault somebody indecently.
That happens everywhere.
Well, that's kind of sort of the point I'm making. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. What I'm saying is that anybody who's worked in a bar or restaurant, this is, for better and for worse, commonplace.
Forget a restaurant. Have you verbally insulted me this morning? Assaulted. I screwed up. I screwed up my own joke there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if people only knew how you started most of the days when you.
Oh, that's not true. That's not true.
So there is an idea here of, I just wonder if people understand. I think there's certainly a line that gets crossed, 100%. I think there are people who say the wrong things and should be held accountable for them. But there is, if you've ever been in the back of a restaurant or bar, there is a lingo and there is a free flowing. It's like, I don't want to use the phrase locker room.
I was just going to say it's locker room-ish.
I don't want to say locker room talk, but there is like this idea of like, get out of my way, but that's the politest way I could possibly say that. Right. But then you get into this idea of you have employees that work out front, and we all know the owner or two who hires people that look very respectable. Did I say that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
They have a certain clientele that they will hire for the front. And so, of course, people are attracted to these people, and then people say things and do things that they should not do to these people. And that's the other catch-22.
No, I get it. It's well, as you said, they are stressful environments, and people handle stress in lots of different ways, and it's not always good. Let me not say that. Well, it's obviously not always good, but sometimes it's detrimental to the people around them. Absolutely. Like some people internalize stress, some people swallow stress, with a tub of Ben and Jerry's. Some people take it out on the people around them.
Sure.
So yes, I can understand why working with the wrong people in a busy kitchen could be a bad place.
So that was a smorgasbord conversation. There's 4 different stories about mishaps and mishandlings at bars over the weekend. So if you have a moment, go to NorthcentralPa.com. You can find all your local news there, and you can find all these stories about the local bars and what's happening.
So let me ask you this.
Go for
it. There are lots of businesses, restaurant businesses is usually one of them, that like January is a bad month.
Okay.
One of the worst months of the year.
Sure.
So with bar incidents, is it safe to assume that bars are worse in January and February, and as it gets warmer, they get busier?
That's a good question. I have to think about that. I don't know. I've never thought about it from the bar perspective before.
Because when you just said that, I was just thinking it finally started to get warm.
Yeah.
And are people now coming out? But then I'm thinking, is the bar clientele, like the late night, the Saturday night at 11 o'clock, midnight bar clientele, are they out anyway? Is it the older people like me that are stuck in when it's January and February?
Yeah, I don't know if it's age necessarily. I mean, if you're just talking about like who are the people you see out, I would argue the wintertime is significantly younger crowd than it is during the spring and the summer.
Because they are hardier.
Yes. However, I still think there's this aspect, like people who haven't been to a bar in a very long time are now going back to the bars. And I think you're seeing a ton of incidents.
See, I think the people that are at bars at 12 o'clock on a Saturday night have been going from the moment they could get back.
You don't think there's people that like for a year and a half, they just they followed the rules and they didn't go out or they...
Not the ones that are flipping tables.
Interesting.
And not the people in the back of the house.
See, what's interesting about that is, to me, I feel as if you're consistently doing it, you're probably doing it in a manner in which you're not getting kicked out, because otherwise you wouldn't be allowed to go back. So what's interesting to me is when I see incidents.
Oh, that's a valid point. Okay, I'll give you that.
Incidents like this, I'm not making assumptions, but I do assume like when there's 4 incidences in one weekend, I think weather could play a part where you were hinting at. But a part of me thinks too, like I bet you there are some people who have been away from the scene, who haven't, been intoxicated in public in a long time, and it probably, I think it's hard. I think
I wonder
how to act on.
I wonder what the percentage of when a person is cut off by a bartender or a manager, what percentage of the time do they peacefully accept this ruling and go away, or how often is there an incident?
That's an interesting question.
Is it 50-50?
See, I think it varies. I think the variable that would switch it up the most is the capacity of the bar.
Okay.
It's much easier to make a scene in a crowded bar than it is in a non-crowded bar. Or do you disagree?
Well, I was going to say in a small bar, I think it's because that's a good question. Now I'm trying to think of the psychology of someone making a scene.
Yeah.
Because I'm not really a scene maker.
Okay.
Except like when the Cowboys score a touchdown, I'm trying to be obnoxious to the people across the room. Because there's always a couple Cowboy fans and we're like, and then when we lose, then everyone yells at us. I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah. And I'm not even sure I'm right. That's just where my head goes. Because other people would say like, well, no, you want less people to see it. So it's easier to make a scene when there's less people in a bar. But see, I think it's easier.
But I think they want more people to see it, don't you? When they're making a scene?
Making a scene.
Well, and if they're I think people in general think that when they're right and they're convinced that they're right, that their immediate belief is everyone would agree with me. So when these people, and you add alcohol, when they're intoxicated enough that they're being cut off, but they don't think they should be cut off, I'm sure that they think most of the people around them don't think they should be cut off. I'm not drunk, ask anybody. So that's...
Do you think more people get cut off in a crowded bar or more people get cut off in a non-crowded bar?
That's a good question too, because I've never been a bartender, so I'm not sure how much in a crowded bar is the bartender, do they have enough time to notice? And in a crowded bar, I would suspect that the person that's that visibly intoxicated has to kind of have made a scene already.
Yeah.
And in a crowded bar, is it more difficult for them to make a scene because they just get drowned out in the masses?
So I'm not accusing any bars of this. However, I would assume that in today's economical climate, no one's getting cut off.
Well, I was just thinking, and I'd never thought of this until we had this discussion. If you're the bartender or you're the manager, and you know that either A, this person has been cut off before and they've been belligerent, or B, you just know from your experience that cutting people off causes belligerence, is it easier just to give them one more and than it is to cause a confrontation?
I wonder, I think we may have just figured it out. I think when you throw in everything through the pandemic and these places are, they're opening back up, colleges and universities are removing their mat, like people, this is the most normal it's probably been in a very, very long time. Weather heats up. This might just be like a triumvirate of things. Weather warms up.
The perfect storm, if you will.
The perfect storm. The weather warms up. It's fair to say that this is the most normal the world has been. And then you throw in on top of it, like economically, these places just should not and probably cannot turn down money.
They need the money.
I wonder if these stories and all of this coming out is really a result of all of those things. And just it is hard to cut people off.
Let's talk about all the times historically that you've been cut off and how it's affected you in your life. But you're such a violent, confrontational guy.
My girlfriend has said to me several times her favorite thing about me. Like, I'm not a happy drinker, but she says, she goes, just your demeanor is just softer. Like, I just don't really abruptly act out when I drink. I'm just not that.
You don't abruptly act out. End of sentence.
Well, I don't know.
You are not an abrupter actor outer.
So I don't know. So I'll still be out and about, but
we'll see. We'll see.
This weekend was a little rowdy.
I will be there the time that you get thrown out. I want to be there
I
witnessing.
don't think you will be. Do you want to do settling into the war, or do you want to do handshake lines or simple?
Let's do the handshake lines.
You really thought about it.
I did. Let's do the handshake lines.
Okay.
I want to get to the boys and girls stats. I'm pumped about that.
So handshake lines are simple. There was a incident at the North Carolina Duke game. For people who don't know, Coach K had his last home game, kind of a big deal, probably one of the biggest deals in college basketball history, to be completely honest.
Yes, and you're only bringing this up because Carolina won.
Yes, Carolina did win.
And truth be told, you're a Carolina fan.
I'm 100% biased in this topic, but I feel like I still have a very valid point.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just trying to be a jerk.
Yes. As they went through the lines, North Carolina upset Duke, which essentially spoiled Coach K's last game at Cameron.
And they beat him by double figures. Like, they beat him.
And as they went through the handshake lines, a Duke assistant would not shake the head coach's hand for North Carolina, Hubert Davis. So here's my thing, because like it's not so much squabbling about like I'm not sitting here whining that Chris Carroll didn't shake his hand. Here's my bigger issue. The next day, there were several reports about here's why Chris Carroll didn't shake Hubert Davis's hand, or here's what happened before Chris Carroll didn't shake Hubert Davis's hand. And so the funny part to me is like that headline should be one of two things. It should be Chris Carroll apologizes for not shaking Hubert Davis's hand, or it should say Chris Carroll did not shake Hubert Davis's hand. And I don't know if it's because it's Duke. I don't know why it is. But for some reason, Chris Carroll gets to explain himself and doesn't have to shake somebody's hand. And this is only a Duke thing. Like, if you go through history, for whatever reason, Coach K basketball. No,
stop it. That's not true.
Coach K and Duke basketball will not shake Carolina coaches' hands. There's film of it. There's 3 or 4 different incidences of it. They won't do it. But going back to Chris Carroll and just what happened recently, my argument to you was, if you don't want to shake his hand, just don't get in the line. Like if you are so upset or so distraught, or you just vehemently dislike somebody enough that you're not going to be able to just walk by this person and shake their hand one time, then just don't get in the line.
Well, this would be my two. We'll segue the stories together. I'm sure, and as you said, I don't know if you just mentioned this, that Carroll said he didn't because before the game, the North Carolina head coach did not shake the hands of the Duke assistants.
Can you and I agree that that's not a good argument?
No,
it's not a good reason.
He did. He talked to Krzyzewski before the game. But he didn't go around and shake off. And I don't know, like it'd be one thing if he big timed him or if he was, but we just think he just didn't make his way around. There was a pregame ceremony. There was a bunch of stuff.
It was pandemonium before.
Right.
Anybody who watched it. It was not a normal basketball game before that game started.
This would go back to, I'm guessing, and for those of you who don't know, Carroll played at Duke. Carroll is a Duke lifer. Hubert Davis played at Duke. He coached at Duke. He's a Duke lifer. This is his first year as head coach. So, but Carroll, in going through this, is so sure that he's right that once I tell everyone my story and say, Hubert Davis didn't shake my hand before the game,
right,
that society is going to say, then I wouldn't shake his hand either. When there's at least 2 of us that are like, it's the handshake line. Be the bigger person, walk through the line, shake the guy's hand. Because I don't know Hubert Davis. He does not come off like a bad guy.
When you listen to him talk, he seems like he's one of the nicest.
He does seem like a pretty decent dude. So go through the handshake line, and especially when you just lost.
Yeah.
Chris Carroll, the next day, even after his explanation, looks bad.
Sure.
And it is just so much better. And I know we when we talked about the handshake line before with the Juwan Howard situation, that sometimes emotions are high, sometimes, and it is tough. 2 minutes after the game, that you're shaking hands. But just be the bigger person, go through and congratulate the team that won, be sympathetic to the team that lost, depending on what side of the ledger you're on. And just, the handshake line takes what, 45 seconds?
It doesn't take long. Just
get through it. You don't want to be this guy the day on Coach K's last game, that one of the stories the next day is Carroll wouldn't shake the other. You never look good.
This is my whole point. I think this is my point. that wasn't the story. The story wasn't Chris Carroll wouldn't shake Hubert Davis' hand. The story is
He
here's
explains.
why.
Okay.
Like,
That's a good point.
And I think that that makes, I don't know. I just disagree with it. This is the other part. We are all flawed. I'm certain that through my playing and coaching career, I have had moments. I have sent apology texts. I believe it was our second. I forget which game it was. I think it was our second PHAC game. I actually doubled back because as I was going through, I missed the kid's hand. Like I was shaking one, and then when I went to go to the next, that kid had already surpassed me, and I was to the next.
So hold on, let me clarify this. You can't keep up with the handshake line? It was conveyor belt too fast?
This is because I try to shake the kids.
No, I get it.
Yeah, and look, some kids shake,
and they just walk. I understand.
I actually doubled back to try to find the kid because I wanted him to know, like, hey, like I wasn't trying to miss your hand and everything else. So it happens. Like things happen. Everyone's flawed. We all get emotional. All this stuff. I have always thought that the handshake line, and this has always stayed with me. You want people to not be able to tell if you won or lost for those 45 seconds. For those 45 seconds,
I would agree with that.
You should be able to, for 45 seconds, no one should be able to tell if you won or lost. And if you can't do that for 45 seconds, I don't know.
You have an issue. I'm with that. Is very well said.
I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad. I'm not trying to point fingers. Again, like we all have our things. Like we are all flawed. We all have our situations and our emotions. But for those 45 seconds, and so like I said to you, if I'm Chris Carroll, go to the bathroom. Like pretend.
No, I get it.
If you can't shake.
No. I disagree. If you're Chris Carroll, just get through the line.
I agree with that.
You have to get through the line. If you can't get through the line,
yeah.
Like I don't care if the other coach, if your wife left you and he's now married to the coach for the other team. I don't care. You have to get through the handshake line.
Yes.
There's
For
just
45 seconds.
And all I can picture now is did you ever see the Lucille Ball episode where the conveyor belts run around their show? That's what I'm picturing you like, oh my God, there's too many kids. It's too fast.
But it's not the funny because after you coach for so many years, you run into kids and you've coached against some of these dudes for 3-4 years. And you only get to see them 2, maybe 3 times a season. So there are certain players that when we go through line, I try to make it a point of like a handshake and like a fantastic career or so sometimes like you're going through and a kid will take 6-8 seconds as you shake his hand, but the line doesn't, like the line is going.
Well, I think I told you this. My kids yelled at me during the middle because they're like, a lot of times I was first.
Okay.
Because and I don't know, I just like, I'm an adult. I'm going to be, especially when we lose, I'm going to go through and be. But then the kids yell at me because I stop and talk to kids on the way through, like,
right.
You really played well today. I wish you wouldn't have played so well today. Please don't make all those shots next time. And so the kids are like, would you please go last?
Right.
Because you hold up the line.
Right.
So, and then when I get to the coach, I almost always stop and talk to the coach. Right. So then next year I will go last because I understand. I take a long time through the handshake line.
It's so funny. Like, it's weird how these conversations come up because this is not what we had necessarily planned on
No.
talking about today. When we had lost to Bloomsburg, this was probably a month or so.
It wasn't that long. A couple weeks.
Was it a month ago?
No.
Okay. So anyway, you tell
3
me.
weeks.
How long ago was it?
It wasn't a month.
Okay. So you tell me. Pick the date. You tell me how long ago it was.
Well, that is true because it was
so
last
we lost to Bloom
3 weeks. 3 weeks.
Bloom about a month ago.
But you might be right. The more I think about it, you might be right. But anyway, be that as it may.
So we lost to Bloom, and as we were going through, all I could think in the back of my head was just like, make sure you congratulate him, because obviously, and what's really going on in my head is like, how do we pull this together? What are we going to say?
Right.
How do we keep the ship afloat? Like, how do we keep everybody on the same team, on the same page? Like all those things. That's flooding you. But what I'm trying to block it out, and in my head, I'm saying when you get to O'Shea and you get to his assistant, congratulate them, great job, like all this stuff. Because again, like that's all that 45 seconds is about. That's it. Like can you just for 45 seconds act in a manner that no one knows if you want.
See, I find the handshake line easier when I lose.
Okay.
Because when you win, it's just like, I think there's no, like, you just have to be so humble when you go through the handshake line.
Mhm.
Like, you're happy, especially if it was late and exciting or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But you've got to, like, I think it's easier for me to be sincere in a loss, to sincerely congratulate the other person, than it is it's just awkward when the other person has to come up to you and be like, you beat us. Now, I'm not saying this to be smart. You don't go through the handshake line on the losing end very much.
But no,
So
what you're describing, I mean, we've been fortunate, and what you're describing is
it's
like,
awkward being the winner.
There's a nervousness that you don't want to patronize the other person, but you do want to let them know that, like, you think they did a good job, or
Right.
you like that they did this, or you like that, this player played well, or it's a hard,
Especially like if it's a really tight game, then it's easier because there were lots of people that played well for them if it was a really tight game. But also, like, they're more devastated if you lose by 2 than if you lose by 22. But you're right, when you just crushed the team and you're like, good game, good game, good game, it sounds very insincere because it wasn't a good game because you crushed them. So not that I'm not gonna say I like losing better, but I think the handshake line is easier when you lose.
Yeah, I just don't think we should get rid of it.
You can't get rid of it.
There's so many people calling to get rid of it now, and I just vehemently disagree with that.
I couldn't disagree more.
Okay. Do you want to do settling into war or comparing boys and girls?
Let's do comparing boys and girls. We'll see how long this takes.
Okay, it won't take too long. So here's what happened. I stumbled across, there was a study done, and actually this was done by military recruiters. So this, yes, so this was information that they received because they wanted to know how to go into high schools and go into universities and try to recruit people into the military. So what they did was they went across America, they surveyed different schools, different organizations, and they were trying to find out the difference between boys and girls. That's
interesting, and it's fun because I would have never guessed that, and I don't mean to hold you up. No. But one of the places now in modern society where we get statistics about people is from online dating sites.
Yeah.
Because they have to give their own personal information and their likes and their dislikes and their biases. Yeah. So, but it's interesting that this came from the military. But go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, this is the way they set it up, because as they started gathering these numbers, what they tried to do was compare what girls are doing, or what girls, I don't want to say advantages, but what they began to notice was the shift in how many girls are doing different programs, are advancing, different things that they're able to do versus boys. And I found, to me, the fascinating question is that, are these because boys have different interests? Are these because boys have different expectations? Is this because girls are further along, more intelligent, further developed? I'm curious what you think some of this will be about. So here's like a handful of basic stats, and then we'll dive into some of like the more in-depth ones.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So a basic one was, for every 100 girls, only 54 boys take high school AP honors in art and music.
High school AP honors in art and music. I would suspect, this is my guess, You're think
gonna, like, dive in every single one of these, aren't you? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. 30 seconds.
No.
I bet music is closer.
Okay.
I just think girls are more artistic than boys as a whole.
Do you think that though, or do you think that it's still more acceptable?
Oh, yeah. Well, yes.
It's like the deeper.
But I think it's both.
Okay.
Because women just, like, even just decorative, and because of the way, with clothing and with like, guys just wear the same 3 colors all the time. Women, so I think they just get.
Maybe 154 to me is like, that's a
it's
lot.
2 to 1. It's a lot.
It's a lot. So here's an example of another one. For every 100 girls who enrolled for a U.S. college, only 71 boys do now. That is a shocking flip of the numbers.
Wow. I would have never guessed that.
Shocking.
I would have thought that was essentially 50-50.
Yep. For every 100 girls, 71 boys. Here's this one's fascinating as well too. 25 to 29-year-olds who have a master's degree. For every 100 girls, it's 73 boys.
Well, that's about the same.
Yes.
Huh. Well, I will say this before we go any further.
Go ahead.
Because I have a nephew that graduated 5 years ago.
Okay.
I had a niece graduate, like she's in her 30s now. I don't remember her graduation. I remember it was inside because it was raining. That's all I remember.
Okay.
But like my nephew, I've had 2 nephews graduate. I had a daughter graduate. I have a daughter who's a senior in high school. When I was in high school, the top students in the class almost every year were boys.
Okay.
Valedictorian was a boy, and the top 3, because at Majorsville, the top 3 give speeches. And then, like lately, I think in my daughter's grade, there was one boy that gave a speech. I think they were talking like the top 10, there were 9 girls and a boy, 8 girls and 2 boys. In this year's class, I think there was at one point where they knew like the top 8 were all girls, and they were trying to figure out who the highest boy was. Like it is crazy how it is flip-flopped. And I think as society's gone on, girl sports are much more than they were when I was a kid. And I think the girls' math science, like you can be math science and be a girl, is just much different than when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, the best math students every year were boys. And it just doesn't have to be that way anymore.
So one of the stats that goes along with what you were just saying, for every 100 girls that are in the top 10% of their high school class,
Okay.
72 boys.
Okay.
So again, it's a lot of this stuff was significantly lower than I expected. So here's some other ones, and these numbers are the ones that are more, I guess, just like shocking. But these ones to me say maybe a bigger picture than just are they doing their homework or not. Like all of those, you could say like maybe boys just don't want to do their schoolwork. Like you could try to simplify the answer. These ones I don't think are so simple. For every 100 girls whose entry into kindergarten is delayed, 219 boys are delayed entering kindergarten.
I can believe that.
Okay. The other one is who repeat kindergarten. So for every 100 girls who repeat kindergarten, 245 boys repeat kindergarten.
For every 100, it's 245. So that's like, wow, that's 5 to 2.
Pretty crazy.
That's 70-some%. Wow.
3 to 17 years old, for every 100 girls who are diagnosed with communication disorders, 189 boys are diagnosed with communication disorders between the ages of 3 and 7.
Well, I would think, to go back to the last one, you were talking about kindergartners have to repeat. And you haven't been around as many kids as I have, but when you think of how many people the kid, when you just say that kid is a terror, how many times that's a girl? It's not very many.
No.
If you've got a kid who is just out of control, it's usually a boy.
Yeah.
And
we'll dive into that. So here's a couple more, and then by all means, like
Sigmund Freud it. I'm ready.
So here's another one. For every 100 girls who abuse drugs and alcohol, 180 boys.
I believe that.
That's for high school girls and boys. Here is for every 100 girls who are homeless and unsheltered, 232 boys are homeless or unsheltered. Here's another one for you. For every 100 girls who are suspended from school, 300
absolutely
are suspended from school. Ages 15 to 19. This one's shocking to me personally. For every 100 girls who commit suicide between the ages of 15 and 19.
Oh, hold on.
This is riveting.
I was going to say that this is going to be higher, but it can't. Well, yeah, I don't even know how to guess this. Go ahead, give me the number.
293.
So it's 3 to 1.
Yes. Boys over girls.
19.
Ages 15 to 19.
Wow.
Suicide. Here is girls who die by opioid overdose. So the opioid crisis. 100 girls, 318 boys. Ages 20 to 29 who commit suicide. 100 girls for every 441 boys.
That was 20s?
20 to 29.
Wow.
Yes.
So it actually gets worse as it gets older.
My gosh. Incarcerated in local jails.
Well, that's,
For every 100 girls, it's 614 boys. And granted, I know that it's boys more than girls, but some of this, the gap is I just can't even comprehend the gap of it. This one's interesting as well. For girls who die on the job between the ages of 20 and 40, okay? So girls who die on the job, for every 100 girls,
it's got to be thousands.
There are 2,171 boys who die.
Because guys do more dangerous jobs.
I mean, I don't disagree with that. And then the last one, and this one's interesting. As far as like veterans of war and different things like that, people who have experienced wounds in their job, and this includes, and the reason they add this in is because of soldiers. So this includes veterans of Afghanistan and Iraq. For every 100 girls, it is 10,080 boys between the ages of 18 and 30. And so here, and before you kind of give your spiel, so I went through those. That's
100 to 1.
Yes. So I went through those numbers, and I agree some of them are very easily explained. I was a boy who, I joked with you before, I was a mess in kindergarten. I didn't really understand the instructions. I didn't understand what was happening. Like, there are certainly things that you...
And I picture you being like the happiest, most oblivious kid.
I was 4 years old in kindergarten.
You weren't disruptive.
I would color the sheet, but I had no idea what I was supposed to actually be coloring. Anyway. There's certain things like that I totally get. Like, there's numbers on there that, like, if you want to chalk it up to boy and girl, I totally understand that. I would argue there are some numbers on here that to just chalk it up to boys being boys and girls being girls, I think is absurd. I think some of those numbers very clearly show that we're either not understanding the immaturity of a boy, or we're not understanding the pressures of being a boy. Something's wrong with those numbers. Those numbers are skewed in a manner that we're not doing what we need to do with the typical boy in society.
Do you want to know my theory?
Go for it.
I have a theory on this.
Go for it.
High school kids, on the boys' side, you need to be good at something. You need to have an identity. And at least that's how they feel. So there are a couple groups. You can either be really academic, you can be really athletic, you can be really musical, you can be like in the Votech, the wood shop, you can be really good at that. There are some of those, but each guy more than girls, because especially when I grew up, it was different because the girls' sports weren't as much. But you could be a popular in-crowd girl and not really be an athlete, not really be a student, not really be this, and you were just kind of there. But as a guy, you have to be able to attach to something. What is your identity as a guy? So if you're not a great student, if you're not, or one of the top students, one of the top athletes, one of the top, Votech kids, one of the top musicians, if you can't play in a band, in the guitar or whatever, if you're not in the band, then the easiest way for these kids to stand out is to be the biggest partier. And that happens to guys way more. Not that there aren't girls with drinking problems in high school, but they're usually doing it because of some sort of issue. It's not to make a name for themselves, because anybody can be one of the biggest partiers in high school, and that makes you cool, at least in their mind. So I think that happens because when you go through and you talk about the arrests and you talk about the lack of I don't know if graduation was one of, but college and degrees and all that stuff, because I would be willing, because guys use so much more drugs and alcohol than girls do. And that's why I think they do it, and it's also the whole teenage rebellion. I think girls, I think girls in general rebel. This isn't universal, but guys need to rebel outwardly. They don't feel manly with a passive aggressive rebellion. women are much more passive aggressive than men. But when you're a teenager and you want to tell the teacher to go pound sand, or you want to, show you I'm going to skip school, it's much more of an outward bombastic rebellion than I think girls internalize it more. And the outward ones get you in trouble more. They get you suspended more. When you're suspended, they get you out of school more. Sure. So I can totally understand why a girl's like, I hate this teacher and I'm going to draw pictures of him falling off a cliff, but I'm still going to pass the class while I'm here.
Yeah, no, the sentiment that you just expressed, I don't disagree with that at all. I think a lot of those numbers can be explained with, I guess, I don't want to call them simple explanations, because what you just described to me, I don't think is simple. But I think you and I could talk through a lot of them.
Yes.
Okay, but there are numbers on there that this goes beyond a simple boy-girl explanation of boys are just more external and girls are more internal. And there are numbers on here where I can't imagine how difficult it is to be a young girl or a teenage girl. I can't, it's especially with social media and just expectations, and I can't even begin to imagine. However, you go through those numbers, if you showed those numbers and you said to somebody would you rather have a boy or a girl? Or would you rather be a boy or a girl?
Right.
And just those are the numbers they're working
Those
on.
numbers say it's a lot harder to be a boy.
Question.
Yeah.
It's not even comparable to what you would want to pick to be successful. And so what I'm saying is there's something deeper. There's something that we're missing. Something's not all there. Clearly something's not all right.
Well, I think
it's deeper than
No, I agree with you. And this I think there's lots of aspects of life where we just do it because that's what you do. And I've had this discussion in coaching, and there's times that you come up why are we doing this drill? Why do we do it this way? Why do we And people's immediate response is, well, that's what everyone does. And my response is, well, does it work? Does it make us better? Why do we do it? Is that just because everybody else did it? Does that make it good for us to do? And I wonder how often our generation, and I mean my generation, not yours. I'm 50, and especially you get people in academia who go 30, 35 years or whatever. So once you get to 50, I don't want to say you're playing out the string, but you can see the finish line. Okay. Do people 50 and up really appreciate how different the world is for these kids than it was for us? And because they're in it, because they see it, I think they get it. But I don't know if they get it. And there is just the whole, this is the way we did it when I was kids, should never be a reason why you do anything anymore, because the world is so much different than when we were kids. Sure. We used to, and I've talked about this on here. There was a whole thing about playing video games when you were a kid. They were playing video games. And because when I was a kid, playing video games meant you sat in your basement by yourself and played video games, unless you had a friend over and you were playing too. But now, playing video games is one of the most social things, because you can have 4 friends on, you can have 8 friends on, you can have all these. So video games are one of the more social aspects of life now for these teenagers. It's better than them going to Tommy's house where there's 2 friends. They can stay home where there's 20 friends.
Yeah. No, I agree with you in the sense of that, things have shifted, and that's not a good enough reason. I sometimes you come across a number or you see a statistic and it just floors you. And I was flipping through and I saw these numbers and it just floored me. Because I don't think the majority of people actually would ever guess that. I think there's easily a dozen numbers on that sheet that people would be off, not even close if you made them guess. And it goes back to the idea of B also, I just think there's this aspect of boys are just, there's a sense with boys that they're just supposed to figure it out. And I think what these numbers demonstrate is that we might be past that mindset. We might be past the mindset of well, he's just a boy and because some of this stuff goes up into through their 20s, and again, the numbers aren't minuscule. They're
well, I think from the one about the jobs, or not the jobs, the colleges. I think the number of, I think there are more financially well-paying jobs for like right out of high school guys, like the blue collar world, where we find now whether you're a CDL driver or a carpenter or there are so many more of those that a boy can be well paid without a college degree than a girl. Because not that a girl can't be a CDL driver, but it's just a field that's way more men than women. And, you know, carpentry, you can be a female carpenter, but it's just way more men, and auto mechanics and things like that. So that's why I think you can still be a financially successful guy without college way easier than a girl, I think.
But here's the thing with the jobs that you just expressed, like those, you can live a good life doing that and everything else. But there's an aspect of like, what's next? And a lot of those jobs don't have promotions. They don't have the next phase or you know, the next move. And so again, like, I think there's just this expectation. I don't know. Like, I saw these numbers, and even when you give that example, I think to myself, like, all right, but like the numbers say that they're not okay. Like, I get that. Like, I get that they don't need a college degree because they can go do X.
Right.
But clearly the numbers show X isn't good. Like if X was good, then these numbers wouldn't be this way. Like,
I do, but I don't know, because like I think of this, and I know just having kids that, you know, are 20 and 18 and stuff, and talking to all these peer groups that have kids that have graduated, and I know people that have had sons, and I know they didn't go to college, and I say, what are they doing now? And I know this is a special time in history, but if you're a 19-year-old boy, if you're a 20-year-old boy, and you want to be in the workforce, you got a job making money right now.
Sure.
Like if you're a 19-year-old girl or a 20-year-old girl who doesn't go to college, what is she doing? And the job, like as a guy, I can think of all, you know, he's with the gas industry, he's up on Reach Road, he's doing this, he's in a garage, he's all these things. As a girl, I don't know where she is.
Yeah. I don't think we're disagreeing, but I think we're having two separate conversations, because the point you're making is valid. There are opportunities for young men, young boys. And it comes down to, like, do they want to do it? Like, a lot of boys don't want to sit in a classroom. Like, a lot of boys don't want to read. I get that aspect of it. I'm just saying, though, that whatever they end up doing or whatever is causing this, clearly the way we're doing it or the way society is handling it is not working, because these numbers are atrocious. These are bad. These aren't like, oh, you know, it's starting to tilt this way or that way. Like some of you said 100 to 1. 100 to 1.
Well, but injured on the job,
crazy.
Because when you think of jobs that have, you know, just injured, the physical labor jobs are so much more men than women.
But even like,
because like if you're
real quick, just so people, like, here were some, and I'm not going to go through the exact stats.
Go ahead.
But here were the topics, ready? Like, we talked about incarcerated in prison. We talked about being hurt on the job. We talked about opioid overdoses. We talked about committing suicide. We talked about, like,
suicide's the one that
a lot of these don't necessarily just pertain to the idea of, like, I'm a 19-year-old guy and there's tons of opportunities for me to work. This is like,
no, I get that.
Broader of, like, however we view a boy, whether it's at the age of 5 joining kindergarten or 13 or 18 or 25, we clearly have it wrong. Because these numbers show that however we view them, as in like they'll figure it out or they'll be okay, the answer is no.
No, I'm with you there.
They're not.
I'm with you there. I think the incarceration, the guys are just so much more violent than women.